He thought he was just helping a stranger with a broken leg, but the woman he carried down that mountain would turn his entire life upside down. Kevran Daly just saw a broken leg, a bleeding face, and did what nurses do. He carried her 3 miles down a mountain through pain, doubt, and silence. Turns out, she was a billionaire. And saving her? That cost him everything. His job, his reputation, his peace. But what nobody saw coming, what even Kevran couldn't predict, was that the woman he carried would come back not to repay a debt, but to hand him the keys to something bigger than a hospital paycheck. This isn't a story about luck. It's about what happens when kindness collides with power, and what one man does when the spotlight burns brighter than the truth. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. That morning, Kevran wasn't looking to be anybody's hero. He was just trying to get out of his own head. The air up on Beartooth Pass hit different, cleaner, colder, like it had something to prove. Up there, Kevran didn't have to be the nurse, didn't have to smile through microaggressions or chase overtime to fill the cracks in a broken system. Up there, he was just a man with boots, a pack, and silence. The kind of silence you could stretch out in. He knew the trail like he knew his own pulse. Steady, predictable. But just as he passed a narrow bend above the switchbacks, the silence snapped. Not loud, not even sharp. Just a sound you can't ignore once you hear it. A groan. Small, human, scared, off-trail, off-map, off-screen. Kevran froze. 2 seconds passed. That's all. Then he dropped his pack and dove into the brush. Branches clawed at his arms as he moved, the ground sloping unevenly beneath him. 30 feet in, he saw her, crumpled at the base of a boulder, her leg twisted wrong, blood smearing her cheek like war paint. "Don't touch me!" she gasped, eyes wide. Kevran stopped cold, hands up like he'd stepped into someone else's crime scene. "Kevran," he said gently, "I'm a nurse. You're hurt, but I can help you." She blinked hard, like she was trying to see the truth in his face. "My phone's dead," she muttered. He nodded once. "Okay, let me check that leg." No answer, but no resistance either. Her pants were torn at the thigh, the swelling already pushing against the seams. He felt along the fracture, the break clean but dangerous. He didn't panic. He didn't freeze. He just moved. Tent poles from his pack, gauze, pressure wraps. "This is gonna hurt," he warned. "Do it," she replied through gritted teeth. He worked fast, ripping the sleeves off his undershirt for extra padding. As he wrapped the splint tight, she watched him, barely blinking. Face pale from shock, but eyes sharp with something else. "You alone?" he asked. She nodded. "Needed space." He gave a half smile. "Well, bad weekend for it." She let out a bitter laugh. "You always rescue strangers in the woods." "Only the ones bleeding on expensive cargo pants," he said. "You don't know who I am, do you?" she asked. "Nope. Should I?" Her silence was the answer. When he finally lifted her, arms under her knees and behind her back, she grunted, then winced. "I'll stop when you need a break," she whispered. "Nah," Kevran said. "I'll stop when you need one. You already did your part." That got a real laugh out of her. Not long, not loud, but real. It felt like the first human moment either of them had had all day. The descent was slow, brutal, and somehow peaceful. She passed out twice. He slipped once, landing hard on his knee. The pain lit his leg up like a fuse, but he didn't stop, couldn't. By the time he stumbled into the ranger station, her lips were dry, her face slack. "Tib-fib fracture, head trauma. She's stable, but we need a vac now," Kevran snapped at the stunned ranger behind the desk. "Wyatt," his name tag said. He nodded, scrambled into motion. "What's her name?" he asked. Kevran opened his mouth, but she spoke before he could. "Blythe. Blythe Kessner." The ranger's eyes went wide. Kevran just blinked. He didn't know that name. Not yet. but Wyatt sure did. And the way the guy looked at her? Like she'd just walked out of a magazine. Kevrin didn't react. He just adjusted her weight and stared at the floor, letting the name settle like a stone in his gut. It wouldn't hit him until later, when he looked it up and realized who she was. Not just someone, not just a woman with a busted leg, a billionaire. And in that moment, he'd carried her like she was just a human being. And that, as it turns out, was the beginning of everything. Kevrin sat in his truck for what felt like hours, parked just outside the ranger station, watching the mountain wind bend the trees like they were whispering old warnings. His arms ached, his shirt was stiff with dried sweat and blood, and his right knee had begun to throb in a steady, bitter rhythm. The adrenaline had finally drained from his veins, and what was left was the weight of silence. He didn't feel heroic. He felt sore and stained, like a man who'd carried a stranger not for glory, not for attention, but because it was the only thing he could live with. He unlocked his phone, pulled up a browser, and typed her name. Blythe Kestner. The page loaded slowly, and when it did, he blinked at the number. $6 billion. CEO, tech, visionary, disruptor. His hands still smelled like brush sap, and the dirt under his nails hadn't even dried, but the woman he'd hauled down the mountain was apparently one of the most powerful people in the country. The kind of name that didn't just open doors, it rewrote the locks. By the time Kevrin got home that evening, the ripple had already turned tidal. His neighbor Tammy from 2B had slipped a note under his door, written in purple gel pen. Heard what you did. That was some hero stuff. You're the talk of the building. Underneath, her teenage son Rowan had scribbled a big smiley face. Kev stuck it to his fridge, cracked a soda, and collapsed on the couch without turning the lights on. He hadn't eaten, hadn't processed anything beyond keeping her stable, making sure she didn't pass out, and getting her to safety. But now the noise was coming for him. His phone buzzed again and again. Texts from people he hadn't heard from in months. News alerts, social media tags. Somehow, someone had snapped a blurry photo of him mid-hike, muscles straining, jaw locked, carrying Blythe like a soldier evacuating a battlefield. A few posts called him a mountain medic. One headline read, "Silent Savior of the Summit." He read the words, but they didn't feel like him. It was surreal, the kind of surreal that doesn't excite, just disorients. The next morning he peeked through his blinds and groaned. Parked outside were 2 news vans, cables unspooled across the sidewalk like vines, microphones in hand, waiting. One reporter was interviewing a woman on the curb. He couldn't hear the words, but he knew the rhythm. "Did you know him? Was he quiet? Did he ever say anything unusual?" Kevrin slipped out the back, hoodie up, sneakers worn thin. He took the long route to Westbrook Medical. Heart low in his chest like it was trying to avoid notice too. When he walked into the hospital, he felt the change immediately. Eyes lingered longer, smiles seemed forced. Admiration and suspicion danced a silent duel across faces he used to trust. The hospital was his place, or at least it had been, the place where he knew who he was and what he was worth. Now it felt like walking through glass barefoot. At 11 sharp, his supervisor, Lorna Pascoe, called him in. She didn't even look up from her laptop when she waved him into her office. "Sit," she said, and he did. "You left your shift without notice," she said flatly. "It was my day off," he replied, just as flat. She arched a brow. "Technically, yes, but you were still under emergency call status. If something had happened, we couldn't reach you." He blinked. "I saved someone's life." Her lips barely moved. "You broke protocol." That was it. That was the whole conversation. Rules over reason, guidelines over gut. "So if a child was drowning and I wasn't in uniform, I'm supposed to let them sink?" he asked. She sighed. "Kevrin, it's politics now. The board's concerned. Terra Helix has ties here. Someone on the board has business dealings with them. They don't like that one of our nurses is the face of this kind of attention." He stared at her, heat blooming behind his eyes, trying to hold it all in. So what are you saying? Her hands folded, cool and controlled. You're being let go, effective immediately. He stood up slowly. The chair scraped lightly against the floor. You're firing me, he said, more to the room than to her. Because I helped someone. Lorna didn't blink, because of how it was perceived. He walked out of the office like a man walking underwater. The hallway stretched longer than usual. A nurse he'd trained 2 years ago passed him and tried to meet his eyes. He looked away. A doctor he'd covered call for last Thanksgiving said nothing, just adjusted his clipboard and slipped into a room. Kevron reached the end of the hallway, touched the doorknob like it might burn him, then stepped outside and closed it behind him. Being fired hurt. But it wasn't the loss of the paycheck or the ID badge that hit the hardest. It was the way they carved him out of the place he'd helped build, like removing a piece of bone they no longer had use for. Not rejected, rewritten. He didn't go home. Instead, he ended up at the diner just off I-90, the one with the peeling booths and the jukebox that hadn't worked since Bush left office. Bia was behind the counter, flipping eggs with one hand and yelling at the morning news with the other. "Kev," she said, eyeing his face, "you look like 3-day-old soup. You want coffee? Or something stronger?" He laughed, dry and bitter. "Both. In that order." She poured the cup without asking, then leaned on the counter. "Saw you on the news. You and that lady. That was you, huh?" He sipped slowly. "Guess so." She nodded. "You know how many folks would have just kept walking? You didn't." Kevron shrugged. "And got fired for it," she smirked. "Because you helped someone? Damn, can't have that messing up their profit charts." He looked out the window, watching a crow pick through the gravel for scraps. She still hasn't called. Bia refilled his cup. Maybe she's figuring out what to say. He shook his head. Not looking for thanks, just something. Anything. He didn't need a parade, didn't want a plaque, but a call would have meant something. Just a quiet, private moment that said, "I remember what you did." But silence? That cut deeper than any protocol. That kind of silence turns rescue into a rumor, a name into a warning. And Kevron Daly, the man who carried a billionaire down a mountain, now carried something else. Doubt. Not in what he did, but in whether the world had any idea what it meant. The call came just after midnight. Kevron was half asleep on the couch, the glow of his phone lighting up the room in sharp flashes. Unknown number. He stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering, then answered with a groggy, cautious, "Hello?" A pause, then her voice, steady, unmistakable. "Kevron, it's Blythe." His mouth went dry. She didn't sound like someone offering gratitude. She sounded like someone drawing up a blueprint. "I wasn't sure if I should call," she continued, her tone unhurried. "But I found out what happened. At the hospital. I'm sorry." "That wasn't supposed to happen." Kevron leaned forward, heart thudding like it wanted to leap out and ask its own questions. "You didn't owe me anything," he said quietly. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," she said, more firmly this time. "You didn't. You carried me with no idea who I was, and you never asked. You treated me like a person, not a project. That matters more than you know." He waited for her to say thank you, but it never came. Instead, she said something stranger. "I want to see you, not to repay you. This isn't about charity. It's a door. One I think you might want to walk through." Then she hung up. Kevron barely slept that night. By morning, the buzz in his stomach had bloomed into something else, dread, curiosity, maybe even a flicker of hope he hadn't felt since they let him go. He pulled the curtain back and felt his pulse spike. 10 vehicles, black, silver, deep ocean blue, lined the narrow street like they were rehearsing a scene out of some political thriller. Engines purred low, almost respectful, like they knew they didn't belong in a place with cracked sidewalks and crooked mailboxes. Kevran stepped back from the window, heart in his throat. What in the world? His neighbor, Mrs. Holland, was already outside, her little dog trembling in one hand while she shielded her eyes with the other. "You know these people?" she called up toward his window. Kevran didn't answer. He opened the door slowly, stepping out barefoot, shirt wrinkled, hair a mess, trying to wrap his mind around the surreal procession unfolding in front of his building. The door to a white Rolls-Royce opened with quiet purpose, and a man in a dark suit stepped out first. Tall, sharp, scanning the surroundings like he had a background in risk assessment. Then came her. Blythe Kessner. Tall, elegant, using a cane like it was part of her posture instead of a necessity. She wore sunglasses and a coat that looked far too polished for Montana spring, but when she lowered the glasses, he knew her instantly. Same eyes, same quiet, same storm behind her ribs. She walked straight toward him, slow but steady, the kind of walk that said she wasn't just visiting. She was arriving. Neighbors peeked out from blinds, some stepping onto porches with phones in hand. Kevran's heart thumped against his chest like it wanted out. "You brought a motorcade to my block," he said, half laughing, half stunned. "I did," she said, lips tight. "I needed to be sure you'd open the door." He gestured inside. "You want to come in?" "Yes," she said. "I would." Inside, the air felt too quiet, like his modest apartment knew it was being outclassed. She took a seat at the small dining table, setting her cane down gently as one of her team members entered behind her, placing a thick leather folder in front of her before exiting without a word. She looked around. "I like it here," she said. "Feels like a real person lives in it." Kevran poured 2 glasses of water, more out of reflex than formality. "So," he said, sliding one across to her, "what is this exactly?" She didn't reach for the glass. "It's a proposal. I've been funding mobile medical units, quietly, for a few years. Rural areas, places no one wants to go. We've got the infrastructure, the gear, the reach. But what we don't have is someone to lead it. Someone who's not in it for the press release." She tapped the folder. "That's where you come in. You'd run it. Field operations, staff training, routing, all of it." He stared at the folder, then at her. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she said. "You didn't ask who I was. You saw a woman in pain and said, 'I got you.' That's the kind of person I trust with people." He didn't open the folder, not yet. He just sat back, arms crossed, mind spinning. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Why now?" Blythe tilted her head slightly. "Because people like you get punished for doing the right thing. And because I'm tired of pretending that money is the only way to measure value." Kevran glanced down at the folder again, still untouched. It looked like it belonged in a CEO's briefcase, not on the table where he ate discount cereal. "This feels like someone handed me a spaceship and said, 'Just drive.'" She smiled faintly. "You don't have to fly it alone." He hesitated, still stunned. He'd spent his entire career being told what shifts to cover, what protocols to follow, what parts of himself to shrink to fit inside someone else's expectations. And now here she was, telling him he could build something from scratch, on his terms. "You want me to lead?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "And not because you're perfect, but because you give a damn. That's rarer than talent." Kevran didn't know if he deserved it. He wasn't even sure he believed it was real. But something deeper than logic stirred inside him. That ache in his chest that never really left after the hospital cut him loose, that quiet fury at being discarded for doing what was right, had suddenly been given a shape, a name, a purpose. And as he sat there, heart still thumping, folder still closed, something in him whispered what his resume never could. Maybe you don't have to deserve it. Maybe you just say yes. The first morning the van rolled out, Kevran stood on the curb, watching the sunrise paint the buildings in gold, holding the clipboard like it was both shield and sword. The mobile unit gleamed, sleek, clinical, more machine than vehicle, but warm inside. A heartbeat in metal skin. The wheels rolled quiet, but inside that van was thunder, stored energy, real purpose. He checked the inventory twice, then climbed in and fired up the engine. No ribbon cutting, no press, just a route, a roster, and a map. He didn't want ceremony. He wanted momentum. As the van pulled onto the highway, he exhaled for the first time in days. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was doing. That mattered more than any headline. Poplar, Montana was the kind of place you only heard about when something went wrong. The local clinic had shuttered 2 years back, and the nearest urgent care was over an hour away. When Kevron pulled in just after sunrise, there were already people waiting. Folding chairs lined up under a sagging shade tent, moms with kids on hips, elders wrapped in denim, and silence. He stepped out of the van, nodded, and got to work. 10 hours later, he'd seen 46 patients, 2 fractures stabilized, 70 flu shots. One toddler's infected splinter, pulled, cleaned, and bandaged. He handed out asthma meds to a grandmother who hadn't had a prescription filled in 6 months. At one point, a teen boy with a bruised rib asked if the van would come back. Kevlon just smiled and said, "Try and stop us." Every bandage wrapped, every vitals check done under a flickering cabin light felt like a rebuttal. A calm, sharp, deliberate no to anyone who'd ever questioned why he was here. He didn't need a press release. He needed gauze, gloves, and grit. But rumors travel faster than help. Within a week, the online chatter began. An anonymous thread claimed Kevron had staged the entire rescue. Another accused him of using a vulnerable woman to leverage upward mobility. One post, dripping with sarcasm, read, "Man saves rich lady, gets rich." Sounds like a Hallmark script. He didn't respond. Never had. But the noise crawled in. It always did. The volume went up as the work got deeper. People on Twitter suggested he was Blythe's pet project. A few claimed it was some kind of PR cleanup, turning one act of luck into a personal brand. "Bought and paid for," one comment said. "Watch how fast this goes corporate." Kevron read those posts, alone at night, legs propped up, phone balanced on his chest, staring into the blue glow like it might explain why doing the right thing always came with a target. At the hospital back in Billings, some of his old colleagues ghosted him completely. One nurse he used to split shifts with walked right past him at a gas station, eyes flicking away like he was made of glass. Another unfollowed him and posted a vague status about people chasing clout in scrubs. But the patients? They kept coming. The lines grew. Word of mouth spread across counties. A mother in Lewistown called to ask if he could help her son with severe allergies. A retired EMT in Havre reached out, offering to volunteer on weekends. Nurses from 3 different states sent emails saying they wanted to work somewhere that wasn't chained to paperwork and politics. Kevron didn't tweet back. He didn't post selfies in the van. He kept driving, kept wrapping wounds and checking blood pressure, kept listening. The truth was quiet, but it built walls, and he was building something that gossip couldn't tear down. Then came the interview request. Shiloh Greer. Not a network name, not a hot mic personality, just a freelancer who emailed Blythe's office with one line. "I don't want your scandal. I want your side." At first, Kevron ignored it. Then, after one particularly rough day, an elder had cried after getting antibiotics for a chronic infection, he said yes. They met in a corner cafe just outside downtown Billings. No crew, no lights, just a notebook and 2 mugs of black coffee. Shiloh was sharp, but not sharp-edged. She asked good questions, and more importantly, she listened. "You carried her 4 miles?" she asked. 3 and change, Kevron said. "I stopped once. My knee wasn't thrilled. And you had no idea who she was?" "Didn't care," he said. "She was hurt. I was trained. That was enough." She nodded slowly, pen tapping her pad. "Why do you think people turned on you?" Kevron paused, stared out the window at the wind lifting dust off the sidewalk. "People don't like when someone jumps the line," he said. "If life hasn't handed you something slowly, They assume you must have cheated. "Do you feel like you jumped the line?" she asked. He looked her straight in the eye. "I got fired for helping someone. Then I got a second chance from someone who could have forgotten me. I didn't ask for it, but I'm not going to apologize for making it count." She sat back, watching him. "Do you ever wish you'd just kept walking that day?" Kevran didn't blink. "No. Never." 2 days later, the article dropped. No buzzwords, no angle, just the story, plain and precise. Kevran's words, his rhythm, his reasons. He talked about being raised by a single mom in Helena, about watching a classmate bleed out in middle school while everyone stood around helpless, about how that moment pushed him into nursing, about the trail, the fall, the silence, the weight of someone else's body in his arms, and the way his hospital called it a liability. He didn't spin it, he didn't defend, he just told the truth. And for once, the truth landed like thunder. His inbox flooded, not with hate, but with hope. Nurses, patients, strangers. "Thank you for doing this. My town needs you. Can you come to us next?" One woman mailed $40.00 with a handwritten note. "You helped her, maybe you can help my dad next." Kevran read each message slowly, carefully, like the words themselves deserved clean hands. For the first time in weeks, the noise wasn't just background static. It was applause, quiet, sincere, long overdue. Kevran found the note on the back of the van after a long day in Livingston, folded twice and tucked beneath the windshield wiper, written in all caps with a heavy, angry pen. It read, "Bought and paid for." That was it. No name, no return address, no explanation. Just a message, bitter and blunt, the kind someone leaves when they want to wound without the guts to own it. Kevran stood there for a second, staring at the words like they might say more if he looked hard enough, but they didn't. Just 4 words, loaded with all the weight of someone else's narrative. He crumpled it in one hand, walked it to the trash can behind the pharmacy, and dropped it in without ceremony. That should have been the end of it. But it stuck to him, floated in the back of his mind like smoke in a closed room, not because he believed it, but because part of him knew the world would rather believe that than the truth. A few days later, outside a clinic setup in Miles City, a man approached him. Late 50s, long coat, quiet eyes. Looked like someone who'd seen the wrong end of too many winters and didn't blink much anymore. "You're a daily, right?" Kevran nodded. "I read that article," the man said, pulling a toothpick from his lips. "You talk real smooth." Kevran didn't reply. The man shrugged, looked around at the line of people forming. "Fame don't last," he said. "You got a parachute?" Kevran leaned against the van, arms folded. "I'm not flying," he said flatly. "I'm working." The man chuckled. "That's what makes it dangerous. Folks don't trust work that looks too clean." He turned and walked off without another word. Kevran watched him disappear down the sidewalk, wondering what kind of life makes someone confuse decency with disguise. Blythe showed up again 2 weeks later. No cameras, no motorcade, just a silver SUV, a driver who stayed in the vehicle, and Blythe herself in a plain black coat, walking with a little more strength than last time. She didn't knock, just waited outside the van until Kevran saw her through the tinted glass. He stepped out, surprised but not startled. "Didn't think I'd see you out here again," he said. She smiled. "I like to follow what I invest in." She walked with him as he checked inventory, her eyes scanning the setup. "You ever think about expanding?" she asked casually. "More vans, more regions, more Kevrans out there." He paused, considering. "One step at a time," he said. "I want to get it right before I make it big." She nodded slowly. "That's the answer I hoped for." Before she left, she handed him a folded envelope. "Something I wanted you to read," she said. "Not about business, about belief." Later that night, under the dim light of a motel lamp, Kevran unfolded the letter. Her handwriting was neat, tight, deliberate. The last line read, "I've built an empire, but empires mean nothing if people forget how to serve. He read it twice, then tucked it into the glove box next to his worn field notes. The next month was a blur of movement and momentum. They added a second van, same design, same mission. New nurses came aboard. One of them was a teenager named Zoe, who asked if she could ride along for a day, just to see if helping people was something she could really do. Kevron showed her how to check vitals, how to read a face before a chart, how to say you're going to be okay and mean it. She asked 100 questions and wrote down every answer like it was gospel. When the day ended, she sat in the passenger seat and looked at him with wide, tired eyes. "You made this real," she said. He didn't respond right away, just looked out the window as twilight set in. Real. That word hit different when it came from someone who saw the work up close, without the filter of a headline or a whisper. At night, when the roads were empty and the van hummed like a heartbeat under his feet, Kevron thought about the mountain, about the sound of her voice when she said, "Don't touch me," about the moment he decided to lift her anyway. He hadn't done it to be noble. He'd done it because the alternative was leaving someone behind. "I didn't lift her for glory," he told himself one night, staring out at the distant stretch of road. "I lifted her so she wouldn't break more." And now, he wasn't lifting just one person. He was lifting a system that had let too many fall through. Town by town, mile by mile, he was stitching together something that looked like access, like dignity, like medicine with a pulse. And through it all, the rumors kept trickling in. But they were quieter now, softer, like they knew they were losing. Some people chase moments, Kevron thought. Flashbulbs, speeches, recognition. He didn't. He built his story out of splints and thermometers, out of sandwiches handed out to patients who'd skipped breakfast to make the line. He didn't get applause. He got calluses. But every once in a while, someone would say, "Thank you for coming," or a kid would wave from across a parking lot like they were old friends, and that's when it hit him. Not as noise, not as narrative, but as truth. This wasn't a moment. It was a movement. And it was his. Months passed like miles. Quick at first, then slower, deeper. The second van rolled into service by early spring, and with it came new nurses, new towns, new hands holding stethoscopes with purpose. The route expanded beyond Montana into parts of Idaho, then Wyoming. Word traveled faster than the vans did, which meant by the time Kevron pulled up in places like Thermopolis or Salmon, there were people already waiting, not crowds. Communities. Kids waving before the engine stopped, grandmothers already seated with medication lists folded like old letters. Teenagers who didn't know they needed help until someone showed up offering it. What started as a rescue had become a routine, and what began as a van had become something else entirely. It stopped being a vehicle. It became a promise. The whispers didn't disappear all at once. They just lost their legs. The stories online slowed, softened, flickered out. People found other things to be mad about. Fame shifted its attention. But the work never blinked. The van kept moving. The staff kept showing up. "You can't argue with a healed child," Kevron once told a skeptical local reporter who asked about the funding, the fame, the past. The article ran quiet but respectful. No angle, just facts. And the facts said more than the critics ever could. Blood pressure stabilized, chronic pain reduced, hope measured not in headlines but in follow-up appointments. In one small town, a man walked 3 miles on a broken ankle because he heard Kevron would be there. In another, a farmer offered chickens in exchange for treatment. The team took the chickens. They named one of them Blythe. Zoe stayed on after her ride along, got certified, went to night school, worked the front of the van with a clipboard and a confidence she didn't have when she first stepped in. One day she sat across from Kevron in a folding chair and said, "I'm going to be a paramedic." He didn't blink. "I know." The old man from Haver got his meds delivered monthly. A new system. Kevron made a chart, taught a volunteer how to track dosage. The old man called him Doc, even though he corrected him every time. People stopped asking why him when they heard Kevron was coming. They asked, "When's he coming?" A waitress in Wyoming gave him pie before he even ordered. A teenager in Idaho offered to wash the van windows. No payment, just a quiet thank you. That's when Kevron knew. He hadn't just filled a gap, he'd redrawn the map. One night, parked outside a reservation clinic, Kevron sat alone in the van, the heater humming and the stars clawing through the windshield. He opened the glove compartment and pulled out Blythe's letter. The paper was worn now, edges curled, crease lines deep. He read it again like it was new. Empires mean nothing if people forget how to serve. The words hit harder now, not because he doubted them before, but because he'd seen them in motion. Kindness wasn't some lightning bolt. It was a rhythm, a beat. One step at a time, one town at a time, one small thing that multiplied in the hands of others. He thought about all the times he could have walked away. After the hospital, after the rumors, even after the offer. But he didn't. And maybe that was the point. It wasn't the rescue that changed everything. It was what came next. Kevron never tried to rewrite the system. He wasn't chasing revolution. He just refused to accept a version of medicine that forgot people. In a world obsessed with performance, he chose presence. In a system that measured success by numbers, he counted bandages and names. "I didn't rewrite the system," he once told Zoe as they cleaned out supply bins. "I just reminded people it was never supposed to be this cold." She'd nodded, quietly wiping down an exam table. There was no speech, no applause. Just a small room, a stocked drawer, and two people who knew the weight of doing something that mattered, even when no one was looking. If this story moved you, share it. The van is still rolling. The work hasn't stopped. And if there's one thing Kevron Daly knows by now, it's this. Stories like his don't end with applause. They stretch out, town by town, heartbeat by heartbeat, until someone else picks up the rhythm. Because there are still miles to go, still people to reach, still wounds to wrap, and lives to steady. So whether you're on a trail, behind a desk, or sitting in a quiet room wondering if what you do means anything, remember, it does. It always did. And the road is wide open. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.